In the spring of 1882, travelers along the Ozark Trail often spoke of a strange river that wound through the valley, a river that whispered. At dusk, when fog gathered on the surface and the cicadas fell silent, the current carried sounds that weren't quite the wind. Some said it was the echo of the drowned. Others said it was only the river speaking in its sleep. Elias Boone, a 24-year-old mail rider, had heard the stories since boyhood. He was a quiet man, worn by dust and travel, the kind who kept his feelings folded away like old letters. But one evening, as his horse drank from the river, Elias heard something that made him freeze. A voice, faint but clear, whispering his name. He turned toward the water and saw something glinting in the current. It was a small glass bottle, sealed with a cork, drifting toward the rocks. He waded in, plucked it from the water, and held it to the dying sunlight. Inside, a piece of folded paper was pressed against the glass. A letter. Elias sat by the bank, prying the cork loose with his knife. The paper inside was damp but legible, written in a graceful, old-fashioned hand. To my dearest Clara, I'm sorry for leaving this world too soon. Forgive me, that was all. No signature, no date. Elias read it twice. The ink was faint, but it hadn't been washed out completely, as if the river itself had protected the words. He turned the letter over. Nothing. A letter of apology from the dead? He tucked it carefully back into the bottle. The air around him felt colder now. The river rippled as though watching him. He whispered to himself, "Who are you, Clara?" The next day, Elias rode to Hollow Creek, a tiny settlement hugging the river bend. The locals knew him, the quiet postman who never stayed long. Inside the general store, while collecting parcels, he mentioned the name Clara. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman with wire spectacles, paused mid-sentence. "Clara Densmore," she said softly, "lives out past Miller's Ridge, poor soul. Lost her husband in the flood of '77. The river took him. Body was never found." Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. The flood had killed dozens that year, sweeping through towns, burying homes and memories alike. But somehow, this name felt different, connected. That evening, as the sun sank behind the trees, Elias found himself following the trail toward the ridge, bottle tucked in his coat. The Densmore cabin stood alone among the sycamores, gray wood half swallowed by vines. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and through a cracked window Elias saw a frail woman seated by a fire, sewing a quilt with trembling hands. He knocked gently. The door creaked open. Clara Densmore, silver hair, kind eyes lined with sorrow, peered out. "Can I help you, young man?" Elias removed his hat. "Ma'am, I think this belongs to you." He held out the glass bottle. Clara's eyes widened as she reached for it, her fingers brushing the glass as though it were sacred. She opened it slowly, unrolled the letter, and as her eyes traced the words, her breath caught. Her voice broke. This is Thomas's handwriting." Elias's pulse quickened. "Your husband?" She nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Thomas Densmore. He drowned 5 years ago." For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the murmur of the river beyond the trees. Clara sank into a chair, clutching the paper to her chest. "He always wrote me notes," she whispered. "Little things. Left them under my pillow, in my apron pocket. Said he wanted me to always find his words, even if he was gone." Her tears fell freely now. When the flood came, he was trying to save 2 children trapped in a wagon. The current took them all. No one ever found their bodies. Elias swallowed hard. "I found this floating downstream." Just yesterday, Clara looked up sharply. "Then maybe," she began, but her voice trailed off. Maybe the river's bringing him back to me. Outside, the river seemed to sigh. Elias didn't believe in ghosts, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was listening. That night, Elias stayed at the cabin, too moved to leave Clara alone. Rain began to fall, tapping gently against the roof. Clara spoke of her husband long into the night, how he had a habit of humming old hymns while fixing fences, how he carved her initials into the oak tree by the river. When the fire died down, she said softly, "I never stopped feeling him near. Some nights I hear his voice on the water." Elias sat by the window, watching the dark river glint under lightning. And then, faint, like a whisper through rain, he heard it too. A voice. One word. Clara. Elias's hand went cold. He turned to Clara, but she had already fallen asleep, the letter clutched tightly in her wrinkled hands. By morning, the rain had cleared. Elias saddled his horse, torn between disbelief and wonder. He decided to follow the river upstream, to see if he could find where the bottle might have come from. The trail wound through the woods, sunlight breaking through leaves. A mile north, near an abandoned mill, he saw something bobbing in the shallows, another glass bottle. His heart raced. He waded in, pulled it free, and unrolled the letter inside. Clara, I see the light on in the cabin. Keep it burning. I'll follow it home. The handwriting matched the first. Elias's throat tightened. He looked up at the river, half expecting to see someone standing on the opposite bank. But there was only silence, and the steady murmur of water moving south. He galloped back to Clara's cabin, bottle clutched to his chest. When Clara read the second letter, she pressed her lips together to keep from crying. "He told me once," she whispered, "that if he were ever lost, he'd follow the lantern in our window home." That night, she placed a small oil lantern on her windowsill, lighting it with trembling hands. "If he's truly out there, he'll find me." Elias helped her trim the wick and refill the oil. From the riverbank, the light shimmered golden against the dark water. In town, folks said she'd gone mad with grief. The poor widow talking to ghosts. But Elias didn't laugh. The lantern's glow felt like more than hope. It felt like faith. And somewhere, deep within the current, something glowed faintly back. Within days, stories spread across Hollow Creek. Some travelers swore they saw bottles glinting in the water at night. Others claimed they heard voices whispering from the riverbanks. The preacher called it the devil's deceit, warning his flock to stay away from the cursed water. But the widows of the town, women who had lost sons, brothers, and husbands to the flood, began lighting lanterns too. One by one, their cabins along the Ozark Trail glowed softly against the night. Each of them waited by their window, hoping their own letter might drift downstream. And the river, silent for years, began to hum again, carrying messages the living were never meant to read. One moonless night, Elias fell asleep by the riverside. He dreamt he was standing in waist-deep water, the current warm and slow. Around him floated hundreds of bottles, bumping softly against his legs. Each held a letter. Each had a name. He picked one up. It was addressed to "My son James." Another read, "To my sister, forgive me." As he looked around, he saw the faces of the dead reflected on the water. Men, women, children, all smiling faintly as the current carried their messages away. When Elias woke, dawn was breaking, and lying beside him, half buried in the sand, was a real bottle. The label read, "To Elias Boone, thank you for delivering the light. Thomas Densmore." Elias stared at it, trembling. The handwriting was identical. The river, it seemed, had begun to write to him. After the mysterious letter addressed to him, Elias realized the river had chosen him. It wasn't just delivering messages to Clara. It was delivering the lost words of countless souls. He began traveling along the Ozark Trail, riding from cabin to cabin, delivering each bottle to its intended recipient. Some letters contained apologies, some confessions, and others simply the faintest whispers of love. Each delivery left Elias drained but oddly fulfilled. The townsfolk noticed a change in him. His quiet stoicism was now accompanied by a gentle warmth. He didn't speak of the letter's origins. He simply delivered them, letting the river guide his path. And as he worked, the whispering current seemed to murmur in gratitude, its voice softer, calmer, as if relieved that its messages were finally reaching the living. One evening, as Elias walked along the riverbank near Hollow Creek, a figure emerged from the mist. He was tall, wrapped in a long, weathered coat, his hat pulled low over his face. "You're the rider who delivers the river's mail," the stranger said, voice low but kind. Elias nodded cautiously. "And you are?" The man smiled faintly. "Someone who understands. Keep doing it. Every word you carry frees more than one soul." Before Elias could ask more, the man stepped backward into the fog. The air shimmered as if he had never been there at all. Elias looked down at the river. The current seemed to twinkle in the fading light, carrying a quiet secret. That night, Elias dreamed of the man again, walking alongside the river, pointing to each bottle as though showing Elias the vast tapestry of unspoken words in the world. Haunted by curiosity, Elias followed the current farther north, through thick woods and rocky gorges. He eventually came to a dried-up gorge, the river's ancient source. There, half buried in mud and debris, were fragments of old wooden crosses. Elias brushed away the dirt to reveal names carved into rotting wood. Thomas Densmore, 1847 to 1877, and dozens more, worn and barely legible. The realization struck him like lightning. These were graves, unmarked, forgotten, swallowed by the river's floods. The bottles had carried the voices of the dead back to the living. Elias sank to his knees. The river wasn't just a messenger. It was a bridge between worlds. Every note he delivered was a gift of closure, a promise that love and memory could survive even death. For weeks, Elias collected the bottles during storms when the river churned and churned. He sorted them, carefully noting names and possible recipients. Some letters brought peace, "I forgive you." Some brought sorrow, "I wish I had stayed." Some simply whispered, "I love you." Each delivery was an emotional trial, yet every recipient seemed changed. Eyes softened, hearts unburdened. The town slowly learned to honor the river, not with fear, but with reverence. Elias began to understand the moral behind his work. Words left unspoken are never truly gone. They wait patiently for the right time and the right hands to be heard. One summer night, the river swelled with rage, fed by heavy storms. The water rose so quickly it threatened Clara's cabin, still standing on the banks. Elias rode through torrential rain, shouting her name. When he reached the cabin, Clara was calmly seated by her window, the lantern glowing bright in the darkness. "He's coming home tonight," she whispered. Suddenly, the floodwaters surged. Elias grabbed her hand, but the current swept them both off their feet. They tumbled, carried by the roaring river. Trees and debris collided around them, and Elias feared they would be lost forever. Yet amid the chaos, he noticed a soft glow ahead, a figure moving in the water, luminous and gentle. Thomas Densmore. Elias could hardly believe his eyes. The glowing figure reached Clara and took her hand. Her lantern floated above them, illuminating the dark waters. "Thomas!" she gasped, her voice barely audible over the roar. "Yes, my love," the figure replied, smiling. "I promised I'd find you." The water didn't harm them. It seemed to cradle them instead. carrying them safely to a calm section of the river. The current whispered their names, wrapping them in warmth. For a moment, the river became a sanctuary, a bridge between life and death. Then, as dawn approached, Thomas's figure faded with the mist. Clara and Elias emerged on the riverbank, safe but shaken, clutching the last surviving lantern. When the storm cleared, the villagers arrived to find the river peaceful, almost serene. Elias sat on the bank, exhausted but alive. Clara was beside him, holding the lantern close. Amid the reeds, they discovered a single bottle, sealed and untouched. Inside was a note, addressed to Elias. Tell him, the river remembers every kindness. Tell him, the letters have all been delivered. Thomas and Clara Densmore. Elias's heart swelled. The river had rewarded their faith and courage. It had shown him that even in the face of loss, love endured, not bound by life, death, or time. Elias never spoke of the storm, but he continued delivering letters, guided by the river's quiet wisdom. Every few weeks, another bottle would appear, addressed to someone in need: a grieving mother, a lonely widower, a soldier's widow. Each delivery was a miracle, and the recipients often wept as they read the words of the departed. Some swore Elias carried messages from heaven. He simply said, "They come from the river." The river, once a source of sorrow, had become a messenger of hope, its whispers now carrying closure, comfort, and love to those who most needed it. By the turn of the century, Elias was an old man, his hair silver like the river at dawn. One morning, as he sat by the whispering current, children from the village ran past, laughing, leaving tiny footprints in the sand. Elias held a bottle in his hands, the last one he would ever deliver. Its label was worn, but the handwriting was unmistakable. To Elias Boone, "You've done enough, my friend." "Come home," he smiled, feeling a peace he had never known. Finally, the river's work was complete. Every soul's message had reached its destination. Elias closed his eyes and let the river's gentle current carry him into eternal rest. After Elias's passing, the river became quiet. Bottles no longer floated downstream, and the whispers faded. Yet on moonlit nights, travelers along the Ozark Trail sometimes reported seeing a faint glow across the water, a lantern drifting slowly downstream. And if one listened closely, just past the rustling reeds, they could hear a gentle whisper: "Every word of love finds its way home, even if it takes a lifetime." The river had delivered its final message. Love endures beyond death, and the kindest acts ripple forward, touching lives in ways the living may never see. The legend of the whispering current remained, reminding all who pass by that no goodbye is ever truly final, and no love is ever truly lost.